and the QR code. So I'll just take a moment for you to either access that website or scan the QR code. And I do believe that in the chat there is the actual file. And maybe you could, I don't know if you can see it or not, but let me know. So if you go to the website, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll be able to access this workbook. If you open it up on your laptop or computer, it should be a fillable PDF file, but essentially it is homework for you to do beyond this session. So feel free to, at the end, if you have questions about what that might be, please do ask. So moving on. So what is digital authority? So I tend to view this as putting yourself out there on the digital landscape of like being the recognized expert, a trusted voice, and essentially the go-to resource within your field. It's about crafting your brand intentionally, and essentially the outcome should be commanding respect, driving influence, and resonating with your ideal audience. So a lot does go into this, but hopefully through this session, it will kind of be broken down to where you could understand it and actually implement it yourself. And so before we begin, I do want to ask this question. Now that you know what a digital authority is, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you consider your current web presence as an authority? One being not likely, and 5 being yes, very likely I am an authority. So if you could just take a moment and just put your response in the chat. I kind of want to know how you rate yourself right now. And I would say I'm maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. Maybe 3.5 is how I view myself. Maybe a 5 or 4. I don't know. I guess it really depends, honestly. Okay, cool. Good to know. Okay, so now in module 1, basically we're gonna kind of take this concept of moving on beyond like a generalist to a specialist. And we want to kind of identify specific pain points your product or service solves better than anyone else. So we'll take a moment. Can you tell me in the chat like what what do you do in your business? Do you provide a product or a service? I would like to kind of understand where you are in the industry and then kind of lean and cater to that. Okay, cool. In development. Well, we'll help you develop as you continue this entrepreneurial journey. Okay. So in today's climate, there are some things to consider. Right now, market visibility is no longer enough to sustain competitive edge. So right now, there is this paradox that exists, and as we enter the age of AI, it's really easy to get lost. There is that topic of, AI slop that exists, and so as it becomes easier to publish content, you get lost and it's harder to be heard. And so basically people do get presented with all this like content but what really matters is like there's not really any value and there's not anyone out there that's really, spearheading these conversations with authority. And so therefore a lot of people who are digesting content don't really feel like there is that expertise that exists. So people are starving for that expertise. So something to keep in mind as we enter this, digital age with AI, is that you kind of need to understand that in order to create content that like actually matters. Also, now that search engines are really heavily based on AI, it's good to know that the algorithms now prioritize this EEAT facet. So, experience, expertise, authority, and trust, and a little bit more on that in a moment. So, if you do have this sort of authority, you can generate more leads than a generic search results. So something to keep in mind. And so I would say this roadmap to authority. This workshop will basically kind of go into discovery, infrastructure, and architecture. If you look at the workbook, there is some homework there where you're going to really look into your unique authority factor. So basically, this is also known as your value proposition. If you've never heard that before, essentially, it's when you think about your product or service, it's what is your edge to that product or service? Like what makes you stand out? And once you kind of really, understand that, then you could really lead into making sure that your digital presence, has more edge to it as we were talking about building your authority. And then, of course, when we talk about infrastructure, it's basically how you build your website in order to be able to look credible and build the trust with your customer. And of course, architecture is a big facet of this. It's also known as like content pillars. I think you may have heard that. But the way I approach this is, as I said, like really leaning into cultural values and integrating it into how you sell your product or service. So the end goal is just basically how do you educate, how do you validate, and how do you convert customers? And so defining your unique authority factor or your value proposition, basically, this is the niche, right? The cool thing about being indigenous is the fact that it's, evidently like what we make up less than 1% of the population. So that in itself is like such, um, there's such like value and really cool facets about that fact. And so, in essence, we kind of are that niche, right? And of course, if we also integrate like cultural values and being authentic and telling our stories, we can become this like sort of go-to person for, our product or service. And so now, because of that, it's also important to understand who our customers are. If we're building a certain product, for instance, if you're like a silversmith, you could say this is like Navajo's jewelry, and that's sort of like your niche, and so that has the advantage. And say that sometimes people are looking for certain types of jewelry. And so you don't necessarily have to make like all the jewelry. You could be very specialized and make something that is really good. I guess I should take the analogy of if you ever seen like the Kitchen Wars or whatever, it's like whenever they go like the show goes in and consults with a restaurant and they're learning more about the restaurant and they looking over the menu and trying to save them from like closing down because basically it's a failing business and so they flip it, right? So whenever they go in, one of the first things that is a problem is that the menu that they have is like has so many menu items, right? And so they always say, okay, we need to refine it and we need to cut it down because then it will meet the problems that people have. Like there's inconsistent orders, maybe orders are getting out too late, that sort of thing. So like instead of catering to everyone, it's really important to take a step back that you can only do, like a few things, make a product, but then do it really well, right? So so just know that this is where you kind of have to spend some time and just, find that high value that meets the needs or wants of your customers, right? So going on, um, so for the homework, you'll be asked this. What is one common industry practice you disagree with? And so just think about your industry, and I'll leave this open if you want to get off, get on and start talking and sharing what common industry practice you disagree with. Like, feel free to share.
This is Irvina. I would like to say that one of the ideas, I guess, that are in any kind of customer service industry is that the customer is always right.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, that's good to hear that. And yeah, and sometimes the customer can come, with like demands that, you can't meet. And there is a reality that, when it comes to disrespect, sometimes you have to not let that slide because there is, on the base level societal expectations that you treat everyone with kindness. And once it kind of crosses that line, you don't necessarily need to abide by what they're demanding or asking, right? So yeah, and it's good to proceed with your business in that manner. I think also what common industry practice that I disagree with right now is that like just picking up any client for the sake of money. And sometimes there are certain, there's integrity that comes along with it. And perhaps the person that's asking for your time, your services, or your products might not necessarily align with what you have like within yourself. And so sometimes it's good to, um, say no, and that's totally fine. And so the reason why I bring this up is because, oop, excuse me, is that this is the seed of your authority. So I kind of want you to recognize that whatever you do disagree with, it kind of does like define who you are as a person and kind of how you view your business. And so it's something really to lean into, especially as we begin to proceed in like talking about your business and like how you can implement it into the digital landscape. So keep that in mind. And also the workbook that I did provide does have some homework for you in this regard. So up next, this is a sort of checklist whenever you are looking at your digital presence. I imagine people do have social media websites, right? Okay. So if you do have any of these digital touch points of like a website, a LinkedIn profile, a Google profile, or content output, which could be like a blog, um, some things you could look for is, for instance, on your website, if you go with a template and you don't take the effort in order to like update like the generic website text, that's a definitely a critical failure point that you should address. And so then you turn it into being like an authority in the matter of like, you know, it takes a lot of empathy, where you kind of put yourself in the shoes of your customer, right? So basically, you kind of think about your website as being this place in which it's like, what am I selling? What do I want the customer to know? How do they get in touch with me? Like, what are these next steps? So it's really converting like your website, your digital presence into meeting your needs of getting leads, converting them into like paid customers, etc. So this is where you could really take that effort into being like very specific with your headlines, right? Another instance is your LinkedIn profile, if that's how you use like how you market yourself or market your services. The critical failure point in that is that the resume It just does bullet points of like the task you did or the responsibilities you do. What you could do is then turn that into like the impact you left. Like it's really about how you change the way you view your work. And basically, you kind of want to highlight, um, like the importance of what you do. And so, therefore, it's good to speak to that. And then, of course, with your Google profile, if you have like a Google listing, instead of just having, letting it fall to the wayside, definitely update it. Um, and then you don't have any testimonials or reviews of your product or services. Like these are things that you can then in turn, update with quality reviews. Your content output, meaning it could be like your blog or post or articles that you put out in whatever third-party service you use. Instead of using like very generic writing, you kind of have to like step back and reevaluate what you're doing and saying, does this matter? Is this value? Will people read this and take something from it? So it's like really transforming how you approach your digital content that you put out. And so from there, Um, we'll move into module two, but before we move forward, does anyone have any questions about module one? So essentially module one was just, identifying your unique authority factor and how you stand out in the crowd. So please, if you have questions, I'm here. And if not, we could proceed. Okay. All right, so moving on to module two, this is building the foundation of your high authority ecosystem. So basically, we'll be doing like a trust audit. It's asking the question, is your website profile leaking credibility? And also, you know, taking into account your visual branding. What colors are you using, the fonts, and the imagery that signal expertise? So essentially, the trust audit, as we just said with that checklist, if you don't have, if you have outdated info, if there's no social proof there, these are areas in which you could build trust, is that people do go to you and they do work with you, and that other people could see what others say about your work or your product. And so it's good to like really put that at the forefront. So to begin all of this work, it's you have to do an infrastructure audit. So essentially, you kind of have to lay out all your touch points on the digital ecosystem, right? As I said, it's a website, it could be your social media, it could be your online shop, it could be your TikTok, your Instagram, things of that nature. So, kind of what we have to do is like, um, there's this concept called evergreen content. I'm sure you might have heard of this, but essentially, it's content that will never, expire. It leads to, um, the product or service that you have. So whenever you are producing content, you always have to consider the evergreen, but then also think about like the content that you need to get out that, you have an event coming up that's not particularly evergreen, but it could also be used in a way that it's also evergreen. So just know that your profiles online really work for you 24/7. And these are the places in which you should have, like basic customer frequently asked questions readily available. So I usually take this approach that if I am being asked a question over and over and over again by someone that I know to write it down and then say like, hey, I'm going to revisit this. I need to add it to my website. So then I could like answer that. So then it kind of takes away that manual need to reply to customers among the, the loads of work that you already have to do as like an entrepreneur. So just something to think about is that when you do start updating your website and you're being more consistent, with the information, it does make you look like you know what you're doing, right? And that's the thing that we're trying to do is build this authority. So yeah, in this day and age, we don't want, a website that you click through. You kind of want things to be um, answered immediately. Like you kind of want to eliminate the need for someone to have to work to find the information. If they have to reach out because their question isn't answered, the likelihood of them even going beyond that is kind of less likely, right? So like this is a way in which you don't lose potential customers. And so be sure to like frame your website in that regard. And so whenever you are creating, be sure to also make sure that your branded visual consistency is there. And like for example, it's like Canva or Adobe Express, they're great online resources, right? Like you could create the graphics that you want, but the downside to that is there are templates. And if you aren't very design savvy enough, it's really easy to get lost in all those templates and have, you know, um, different visual imagery for your product, right? And the downside to that is that you don't have this visual consistency where, you think of Coca-Cola and you stand out, people remember, right? So be sure whenever you're creating content to try to stick by some branding guidelines. And it could just be as simple as, I like these colors, these are my brand colors, this is like my font. And these are the types of graphics or visuals that I use, right? So that's super important. Next thing to keep in mind is structured data and semantic clarity. These are very basic. This leads into like SEO. If you're not familiar with SEO, it's search engine optimization. So you kind of have to lay out if you look at your website, basically you kind of have to like think about like what information am I giving to customers? What are customers looking for me from me? And then basically, it'd be easy as like for instance, if you're selling a product online, it's like, okay, people want to know where's the shop? What categories of products do I sell? They're going to ask for frequently asked questions, which would be like, what's my return policy? What's my refund policy, etc. Or like, is there a repair um, place? And if you're making native jewelry, you kind of want some people ask for like, do you provide like a certificate of authenticity? So it's really laying out and mapping the types of information and data that you will potentially need to provide to your customers. So just once you start laying out data and structuring it appropriately, I tend to say use it in a way where they're called mental models. It's this like sort of exercise of like, sitting back and saying, okay, if I were looking for this, I most likely would expect to find it here. And a cool thing about this is that you could even sit down with other people and ask them like, hey, I'm selling, like a concho belt. If I were to put it on my website, where do you expect to find it? And most people, for example, they say, oh, well, I expected to see a concho belt under the category belts, right? Or accessories. So the more information you get, the easier it is to build this like data and like that will lead into semantic clarity, which actually goes very well when you put things onto the internet, right? It helps search engines find and catalog your website appropriately. And then, of course, as I said, optimize conversion pathways. So conversions is basically, you're trying to sell something. And so how do you take someone who's just browsing, right? And then how do you convert them into being a paid client? So that's usually the least. So you basically have to kind of analyze that process in order for that to occur. So the easier, the better for someone to give you money is how you can optimize it. So for instance, in my business, if you go to my website, I have this one button at the top. It just says start. and people click it and it pops up this form and it asks like, hey, what can I help you with? What are you in need of? It then the customer sends it to me, and then based on whatever answer they have, I'm already quick to reply to them through like some templates that I had already typed out, and then a way for them to schedule time with me to like talk about it further. But in that process, I already kind of send them over my rates because it gets a lot of these things answered to where it's smoother in order to make a potential client into a paid client. So this is what you kind of have to do whenever you kind of want to do an infrastructure audit. All right, so I'll pause there. Does anyone have any questions or any like business advice that you want to ask when it comes to doing an infrastructure audit? And yes, I am using some words that are very specific to the digital landscape. So at any time something doesn't make sense, please let me know. I'm happy to explain it further. Okay, so
I have a question, Vanessa.
sure, what's up?
So
Yes,
when you talk about clarity, can you go back to that other last slide that you had?
yes, sorry, there we go.
The, let's see,
Yes, semantic
the,
clarity.
yeah,
Yes.
how do you do that on your website as far as like how it goes throughout your whole website?
Yeah, so for me, I tend to kind of lay out all the sort of work that I do, right? Like it's listing my services, and then from services it's like listing, branding, it would list illustration, it would list like consultation, right? So it's like a way in which you put all the information that you kind of deal with. For my business and also for my customers. Another would be like my blog, and the content is structured like press, it'd be events, it would be insights or case studies, right? So that's how that's structured. But then it goes into my e-commerce store, which then is like products, and then I have the list of product categories, right? So it'd be like shirts, hats, accessories, so then when you start laying out that data and making it more structured, it then helps you map out how you lay out your pages. And then so the semantic clarity blends into the fact that when you start categorizing your website appropriately, it's easier for search engines to surface those results easier. And it's also making it easier for you and also your customer to navigate the website. Because if you start building like a one page and it has so much information and it's like a mix of stuff, people are going to get lost and confused. And so that's why it's kind of important to have structured data, which then leads into this semantic clarity. And semantic clarity could also be how you like a website URL. For instance, it could be like your, website.com/blog slash like title of the blog. You know what I mean? So it's like when you start laying things out like that, it's easier um, for you and for SEO. So it's just kind of an expectation in the digital landscape. And um, those are just like best practices going forward. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did, and it kind of gives me an idea how to streamline it a
Yeah,
little bit better than just here and there and just not understanding that part of it. So thank you.
yeah, exactly. No worries. Okay. All right. And so a cool little study that I came across recently, it was from the American Impact Review. Out of this study, it said authority consistently outperforms generic visibility in sales. So they said that content marketing has emerged as a key organic strategy, particularly for D2C brands seeking to build authority and trust. So DTC is direct to customer, by the way. So basically, this just says that it content marketing is kind of the stuff that you create and then you put out there. So it would be like blogs, it could be articles, it could be features on your products or services. And if you start producing more of that and kind of implementing these authority facets, then it begins to build authority and trust. And that's something that stands out way more. And this is an organic strategy. So, there's like paid advertising and paid marketing stuff, but then there's this organic stuff. So, this is kind of the things that you create. And as I said, in order to make this successful, you kind of have to put yourself in the seat of your customer and think about like what questions do they have? What are they curious about? And how can I cater the content to fit what they're asking, right? And then, so another facet of this study is that identifying the shift from a push to a published mindset as essential for creating content that attracts rather than interrupts. So basically, this means that currently, as people are making content marketing, there's really this mindset that they're not trying to push so much stuff out onto you. Like when it comes to social media, or it's, or it's like a newsletter type of stuff. Um, it's more or less like you are publishing the stuff that exists on the internet that eventually someone will come and find, right? So, this basically, when you are creating this published content, um, it's something that it attracts people because one, it's valuable, and one, it's like meeting their needs or it's answering a question that they have. So it's something to consider. Let's see. Okay. All right. And so when you are creating content for your website, um, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are in the service industry, it's really important that you create case studies. Case studies are basically kind of like a portfolio or a project overview, right? But it does go in depth of like, you state a problem, right? Of like, okay, this company approached me to help them solve X, Y, or Z, right? And then you kind of go into you cover the research that you had to do. You then go into your findings and, you kind of look at the data and then say like, what is this data telling me? And then you talk about, oh, from this is what we started doing. And then once you implement this solution, you then have like findings that kind of follow. And from there, you show like the impact that was left, right? Like you kind of show like, oh, because we changed this, we saw an increase of profits by 10%, or we noticed our conversion rate went up, that sort of thing. So like case studies kind of show that your services are working and that there's value behind it. So um, whenever you're creating this content, it's important that you have a case study on your website if you are in the service industry. If you do have a product to sell, by the way, it's good to hone in on this like behind the scenes of your creation of when you like start to finish of the product. You could talk about we do this differently, and it's because it might take more time and effort, but, it's because it makes a better product. And that's why we have to sell it at this price, right? So when you start doing these like quality standard videos or tutorials or content that you put on your website or on social media, it really does speak to, the authority that you have of like what you're doing in when you are selling your business or you're selling your product. And then also the solution and action video. So sometimes those are good because someone who's probably in your field, or someone who's interested could see that basically you're like, hey, I got the ring stuck on my finger. How do I take it off? Like, here's like a tip or trick to remove, like easily remove a finger that or remove a ring from a finger that got stuck, right? So like if you do like start thinking about content and in answering needs or common things that occur, it's like beneficial content that's valuable. And then also there's this the 80/20 rule. So it's a way in which you view 80% of the value and 20% of the pitch. And I'll go into that in the next slide. But before I do, um, does anyone want to go off mute and respond with this to this question? What are some of your cultural values?
Do you mean pertaining to the business that you do?
Well, I guess like just in general, like
Just,
to you or yeah, that exists to you.
I would say like knowing where I come from
Yeah.
is important to me, and the foundation that has brought me to me being me of who I am, you know. I try
Yeah.
to pass that on to my kids, knowing my Haudenosaunee side as well as my Dene side. Um, it's kind of like on both sides that the culture has been taken away from them. So through my parents' generation and then through my generation, it's trying to like reestablishing that, learning it. And so it's very important to me to have those designs, the meaning, the understanding, to understand whatever I create has a story to tell. So I feel like it's very important into what I do.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Does anyone else have any cultural values they would like to share?
I think it's important, like she said, that you emphasize or you at least express who you are in terms of what population you're wanting to serve as well. I think it's important that you tell the story behind who you're representing, what what you want to accomplish in helping that community, and how you fit into that position. And also acknowledging some of the details as it relates to who your members are, what you're trying to do in terms of reaching out to the population that you're wanting to serve. I mean, it's kind of hard to define, but I think as a Native organization and working with Native people, we know how um, our people have gone through the role of living in this country and have struggled in terms of trying to find a place to fit because services, generic services across the country don't always fit the needs of our Native people. But if we can find a way to invite our community to participate in the work that we're doing and informing them as to what we're trying to accomplish, then that would be beneficial. I mean, in terms of um, the value system behind, I think, for me, a Native American organization would serve. I'd like to focus in the area of aging. So, aging is something important to me. And so, I'm hoping that grasping the focus of our community members, that are senior citizens, but also are our elders, and also working with agencies that are wanting to reach out more to Native communities and haven't been successful in doing so, or even in the area of education and cultural awareness, the focus of educating the community at large about who we are, what we do. I think there's a lot, in that focus point of knowing who we are, what we want to do, and the community we want to reach. So, sorry, a little long winded because I'm trying to think about how I want what my value would be to something like this. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's super important. Yeah.
One thing I would like to add is just one of the cultural values is always thinking of others and kind of putting yourself in their position and how you want to be treated with respect, with kindness. a good mind, a good heart, and anything that I create, I always try to be in a good frame of mind to put good energy because that's what's going out to them. So I would say just that Hojong, I guess you can kind of sum it up with that one word as far as cultural values of always thinking of others, being respectful, I would say is some of the cultural values that I like um, to express in my work.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what the overarching that I'm hearing is, from the Navajo term, is like kinship, in our relationship to others. And I'm hearing also, like you said, Hojo, so it's balance and beauty, and it's basically seeing yourself as one part of a whole. So that's really cool. Yes. So these are good cultural values. And so therefore, I always like to ask everyone, like when they are doing their work, is like to take these cultural values that we've talked about and inject it into your work and then speak to it with authority, right? That's like how we could stand out in the digital landscape and among other competitors. So, because that is really like the edge that not many have. So, just use that going forward. All right. So now, I did cover the 80/20 rule. I feel like this is like super important to consider because the rule is simple. It's basically looking at the 80% of your outcomes come from 20% of causes. So that's what the 18/20 rule means. But when we apply it to business, it really means that 80% of your company's revenue is generated by 20% of its customers, right? So whenever you are looking for new ways of doing business, just keep in mind that it's good to cater to those customers that, generate the most, but also balance it with cultural values too, right? Like, because it provides the purpose and in this world in which we live in is it's driven by capitalism, right? It's always driven by profits. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So if you can in a way also include your cultural values in what you do. I heard that, it's always like, how can we give back to our community too? And then maybe this could be a way in which you are building content. If you could do tutorial videos, that are geared to like beginners, or even think about internships or mentorships as you grow as a professional, it extends back into the community. And if you ever feel like, okay, all I'm doing is like capitalism, capitalism, profit, 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 you could always offset it by other ways that align with your cultural values. So I always want to say that because sometimes whenever I do these presentations, it is, capitalistic in nature, but that's just kind of what the society we live in. We have to survive, but it doesn't always have to be feel like it's empty or soulless. So take into this account this 80/20 rule. So whenever you think about the people who make you the most profit, that's how you could align your business plan, your content, but offset it by giving back to your community and aligning with your cultural values. All right. So, I guess we will be moving. I'm going pretty quickly through the modules, but I know we're gonna have like a break at noon for like about 10 minutes, and then we'll get back into it. So before we go into like module 4, we could take a moment. Either we could take an early break and then come back at 12:10, or if anyone has questions, feel free to ask him here and now, and then we could go to the next into the break and then come back.
I don't mind taking a break.
You don't mind taking a break? Okay. Sounds good. So I guess we'll come back at 12:10. Sound good? All right. I'll see you at 12:10. I need some coffee.
Okay.
All right. Okay, see you soon.
Okay. I hope you are well, period. Hanging in there, hitting the first hard.
Hey, Randella, you're
Oh,
unmuted. Just
oh,
stand up.
sorry.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's almost 12:15, so I'll just wait one more minute to get everyone back.
I'm enjoying everything so far.
Good.
It's kind of helpful on the website part because I've been thinking about on my end, like how to redo my website or what I need
Mhm.
to do. So it's kind of helping me lay the foundation, give me ideas of a direction to go into. So thank you.
Yes, definitely. Good. Yes, if there's anything I want for all of you to get out of this is that you can do it and make a website that works for you and isn't just like a digital business card, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing, advice. And even with the social media part, I appreciate that too, to kind of
Awesome.
open that up. That's the part that I'm still working on and trying to
Yeah.
get familiarized and get better at it. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Great to hear it. Okay. All right. So we kind of sped through module 3 before the break, but we'll begin module 4. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your break. I sure did. But in module 4, we're going to cover over the scaling your influence. And then this kind of equates into you becoming that authority in the digital world, right? So basically, mastering the search landscape. So this is implementing basic SEO for non-techie business owners. And so I will kind of fill you in on what that entails. And then also we'll go over the topic of social proof, how to solicit and display reviews that actually convert, right? Okay, so some of the core search engine optimization fundamentals. There are tools that exist out there. One of them, you'll begin to hear about keyword research, right? So there are tools like, for instance, Google has something called like Google Keywords. It's this sort of service that you would sign up for. And you will have to set up like a Google workspace essentially, but you could add your website domain into the keyword planner. And then from there, it will kind of like analyze your website. You could also use other third-party services. Some are called like Ahref, like Ahref. It's like a code name. It's like basically it tracks um, how your website shows up and surfaces on search engines, and it uh, kind of scans it and analyzes different keywords that kind of stick out and that are prominent. So these identify the terms your audience uses, and then it also looks at like competitors. Um, and these tools, you could use these tools to increase how you surface on search results. And then also it kind of like helps you, compete essentially. So the cool thing about the when you do keyword research, you'll begin to see different themes, right? Like for instance, say you are selling Native American products, you'd be kind of surprised that people look for I always find this interesting because you'll see things like someone searched dream catchers, but yet they found your bracelet that you created, right? And you'd be like, well, why are like dream catchers surfacing, right? Well, it's good to understand that it kind of highlights how other people think or how people find you. So, one of those things, like if you see dream catchers, it's kind of like this sort of entry way for people to find other native like products or services, that type of thing. So you'd be kind of surprised that maybe you should write up a blog that talks about the significance of dream catchers. You'd be surprised. But the thing is, when you start doing the research of keywords that are important to your business, you'll begin to like see little things that don't quite make sense. But then once you think about it, it totally makes sense as to some why someone found you through that keyword. Then another topic is like on-page SEO. So if you didn't know this, it's really important to understand something called header tags. Essentially, your URL needs to be SEO friendly. For instance, when I gave you the URL to find the workbook, it did say the Digital Authority workbook with like the hyphens in between, right? So believe it or not, your URL acts as a way for people to find that page, right? So say if you're selling, like a let's see, maybe you're selling ribbon skirts, right? If your URL doesn't say ribbon skirts, the likelihood of that showing up in a search on Google, Yahoo, whatever it might be, it might not even surface. So just be mindful that whenever you're creating a URL, you have to put the keyword in there. And also this surfaces to the title tag of what your page is even called, right? So it's important to have like the information there very clearly labeled, and the header tags are important. So what I like to do, I like to go into, either Google Docs or even Microsoft Word, and I write my content out and I stick with the H1 tags. It's like title, subtitle, that sort of thing. You have to have that hierarchy because if you don't have H1 tags, what happens is that you could stylize it on a web page, but what happens is you lose that hierarchy of your information and it makes it difficult for search engines to catalog your information or to surface it appropriately. So my rule of thumb is that write your content out not on your web page builder, but really get into the habit of like using a word processor and typing it out there and then assigning the appropriate H1, H2, H3 tags. And if you don't know what that means, like feel free to like let me know and I could kind of like describe it a little bit better, but then copy it from there and then paste it into your web page builder because then you're able to preserve the hierarchy that's so important whenever you're trying to get noticed on the World Wide Web, right? So be thoughtful when you do that. Another aspect of the core SEO fundamentals is your content quality. Like really, um, as I said, we are bombarded by so much content, right? Like we sometimes I don't even look at the news sometimes because it's things that I don't want to read or um it doesn't have any value for me personally or even like business wise. So like whenever you're thinking about your content that you put out, like try to make it unique, make sure that it's helpful and that it's well organized. And also it like in the world of AI, it really has to they're catering it to where it's like you preface a question and then you're the answer, right? So like try to always make it very clear like this is the question being asked and this is the answer to that, right? So this is just the day and age in which we live in now. So it's really beneficial if we could start creating our content in that manner. Another aspect is technical SEO. So basically, your website is crawlable. There's something called a sitemap that needs to be created. There are tools, like for instance, on a WordPress website, you can install third-party um, SEO plugins. Like for instance, I think there's one called Yoast and you could generate a sitemap. But even further, you could take it to Google. And if you abide by all the advice I had given you with like the structured data, uh, pages clearly labeled, and you could create like a nice robust sitemap and then submit it to Google Search Console, or even you could do it on Bing or Yahoo. It's kind of this like back end thing that you have to do. You kind of have to search it out. But you could submit your sitemap to these search engines, and that's what they utilize to showcase your website on their search results. So it's good to do that, but then also as you're designing, make sure that it's not too content heavy or media heavy, like with videos and images. And I really say this because if we are kind of tapping into, our own community, think about, when we think about like the Navajo Nation, it's so vast and they don't have high speed internet like we do, right? So will load quicker for us doesn't load particularly fast for them. So just think about our relatives that are on 3G data, like don't put too many graphics. Try to stay away from those nice visual, like I know it looks pretty, but you also got to understand like if you are wanting to cater to community and like teach them new things or inspire them through your product or service, keep them in mind too, right? So yeah, so make sure that it loads fast. There are tools out there that exist where you could just throw in your domain name and it will tell you how fast it took to load your website. Always also, if you're ever designing like on Wix or Squarespace, you might be on a laptop and it looks great and pretty there, but definitely pull up your phone, load in your website, and just see how it looks. And then you'll see if it's even mobile friendly, right? Another facet is cybersecurity. If you are building your own website, there are ways in which you could get like a security certificate to make sure that it has the HTTPS extension on it. So like make sure you have that, but I think Wix and Squarespace do a good job at already integrating that, so you don't need to worry about that. But those are like some technical things that you need to look out for, because if you don't have a secure site, Google's going to block it immediately, and no one can visit your site because they always put up like that blocker, that warning that, this website's unsafe, so please don't visit, right? Another thing to think about is off-page SEO. So you could build authority by backlinks. So basically what that means is like if you know your network, like for instance, I could ask Native Women Lead, like, hey, can you put up an article recapping this workshop and at the end of it, can you link to my website and tell people to come here to view to work with me, right? So that's like an example of how you could create like a backlink because right now I'm pretty sure Native Women Lead has like a reputation and it's deemed quality from Google or Bing or whatever search engine it might be. So then that backlink works for us. And so just think about doing that with other people. Like, hey, can I write a blog and you quote, like I'm quoted in there, or like, hey, can I add your website to this article that I'm writing? Because that's a way to make your authority online more evident. And so a next facet to this is the measurement. So this gets into like the data analysis and just looking at what is actually happening on in the behind the scenes, right? So there are ways in which you could track website traffic to your site. It could be within like the site builder. If you have more freedom, like injecting code, you can connect it to, like Google Analytics, that sort of thing. There are third-party plugins or services that do the same thing. But basically, you could look at the metrics like bounce rate. It basically means like, like how long does people stay on your website? Conversion rates, like are people actually clicking the checkout button? You could even track that. Like, are people adding products to their account or to their cart? And, like you could look at those things or like what products are most popular, that sort of thing. So the more information you could get in, the best. That's how you can make like data-informed decision making going forward, and that won't hurt your business. It will actually help you. All right. And then lastly, to basically build your authority is to talk to your clients. Um, a big a big thing is that we tend to neglect this aspect. Usually it's over fear of like, well, maybe it's a negative review. I just don't want to hear it, right? So by getting your feedback from your clients or your customers is a chance for you to learn, to grow, and to iterate. So basically, you learn from it and then you go back to the drawing board and then implement any changes or recommendations or keep doing what you're doing because you're doing a great job, right? So act on the negative feedback. And I know it can be scary. No one wants to be told that you're doing a bad job, but it's like a good way to know where you need to make improvements, right? So then with that negative feedback, just use it to rise to the occasion to improve. Like this is like the beauty of what we do is like we iterate, we improve, we get better, and the only way to do is to just start and be open, right? Um, and ask for testimonials. Like if you're selling a product, maybe on your receipt, say like, how did we do? Implement marketing strategies in which you could send an automated email to someone and say, hey, can we get your feedback on what we did? Like, and then yeah, as I said, just like learn from what you hear. And then also if someone gives you like an amazing review, like definitely share it. I find that I have a hard time sharing my work because I find like I don't know, I just don't like I get really weird of like I don't want to see like I'm being like boastful, you know. I don't want to seem like I I don't want that sort of like narcissistic uh tendency. That's like how I view it. So honestly, like I had to get over that and I had to like begin to talk about the praises that I got. I had to share my successes. I had to share my work. And so do the same thing with your testimonials because that's the way in the end to build this digital authority that we're talking about, right? And so I want to ask all of you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate yourself as a digital authority if you were to implement the information that we presented today? So this is kind of in relation to the answer that you gave earlier. Like, how would you rate your digital authority if you were to take the advice I had given you seriously? So yeah, please put it in the chat. I would love to know. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, I'm hoping that we could get that up to a higher score. I know it's a big topic to digest in just like a few hours. But what I could do is I'm going to share um, another screen to kind of get you um, to kind of get wrap your head around what you should do to help you get that score up, right? Okay. So each of you may have gotten a link to this workbook, right? And so in this workbook, um, I want you all to just take a moment in the next couple of days or even today to go through it. So basically, the first bit of questions that you kind of have to answer are what is one common piece of industry advice you disagree with? And we kind of covered that earlier today. And you could write down your response. And then you could also talk about what is the number one transformation your product or service provides. And you could write that down. And so essentially at the bottom, you'll see this like homework section here. And it kind of tells you what you should do. Basically, you're going to just sit with your answers and you're going to ponder it, right? So for instance, in this case, it would be like take a moment to reflect on your responses. What does it tell you about your business? And you could think of this as your edge and how you stand out. So for me, the way I would answer this is What is one common piece of industry advice you disagree with? So for me, honestly, as I work in the digital landscape and I work in marketing, I find that it's always, get down to business, always turn a profit, right? And it always neglects like the human experience or like understanding that the work that we do does have power, right? And I find that sometimes we tend to neglect that aspect of like our work can literally change the world if we want it to, right? It's the way we carry ourselves, it's the message that we want to get out. Like even if you are creating like a product, like for instance, like jewelry, you could play into like um some artists that I have worked with in the past, they were talking about how some of the patterns that they put in their jewelry represents like meaningful culture, like has cultural significance, and it always, it's like either the river or whatever, like water or like nature imagery, and so they always talk about how our culture is like grounded in the land that we live on, and that these are our cultural values, and in turn, like they speak to like what they do and why they make it, and it's like much more important than what it is. And so like in a way, like we're preserving culture, right? Like we are our culture keepers. So like in that way, when we start fighting against always like making cheaper products, um, you know, selling our work lesser than, like if we charge appropriately, we're seeing that we do have value. And so therefore, it does transform that the take on capitalism where it has to be exploitive. And it's like, no, I'm changing it to not be that, right? And so then I view my work as like the number one transformation my product or service provides. In my bio, it says that the work I do, I want it to be equitable. Like I see that the work I do, I can pick and choose the clients I work with. I could pick that the people I work with are also fulfilling the missions and values that I have for myself and also that align with my cultural values. And so I see there's power in that, right? So that's how I would answer that. And so then take a moment on your responses. What does it tell you about your business? And so I would say, okay, well, my business is not for everyone, right? It surely won't really fit the mold that like, say if I work, if Intel here in Albuquerque reaches out to me, it could fulfill it, but then at the same time it doesn't. So again, this is that niche that we're talking about. This is the edge that I have on all the other marketing agencies across Albuquerque, right? Like that's my edge, and no one can do what I do. And so therefore, I need to speak to that. I need to emphasize that. I need to, provide my services in the way that I want to and that work and align with me. You know what I mean? So just know, like, when you go through this workbook, for instance, another page in here is who are your three competitors? And so when you sit down and you think about who else is doing what I'm doing, just list them here. And then you'll see, like, at the bottom, it says, what are they failing to talk about online? So fill in this box here. And then from there, the next step is like, use this knowledge to your advantage. Could you fill these gaps? Would it be worthwhile? Are you talking about these issues or topics online? And so when you do this workbook, it will then help you prepare to create the content that you need to have on your website, right? These are the content that you need to post on social media. So these are so then we will also go in this workbook, there's like the first 5 second checklist. So this is in relation to your website. So the first three things I always think about is, does my bio or about page clearly state who I help? If it does, check it, right? Is there high quality professional images of me or my products or services? Is the call to action, the CTA, visible without scrolling? So these are like three immediate things that I find that are important to have on your website. And if you can't check those boxes, then it's good to address like, well, what do I need to do in order to fulfill these like three requirements? And then of course, the trust stack is kind of what we need to look into. List some things to brag about you or your business. So these could be your certifications, reviews, years of experience, and media mentions. So if you could write that down, just know that whatever you write in this area will be super important to include on your website or your bio, your LinkedIn profile, etc. And so yeah, the homework would be take some time to review the above checklist in Trust Stack, update the checklist or include the Trust Stack to your website to build trust. Take it a step further and schedule time in your calendar to dedicate 15 minutes daily until it's completed. So, I hope you find this valuable. And then again, like if you go through the workbook, it will kind of cover everything that we have done, but these are more actionable steps that you can take. And so hopefully your response of the scale of 1 to 5, when I ask you to rate your digital authority, I hope it increases by 1 or 2, or you feel like it's at a 5, because that's the point of this workshop. But yeah, I guess I will pause there. I'll leave the remaining time open for a Q&A if any of you have questions that I can answer.
Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate it. It was really good and knowledgeable. I love the workbook. I am going to definitely go through the workbook and fill it out. I think it's very helpful and kind of just gives you a direction and kind of opens your mind of thinking outside the box as far as your website media goes as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, I guess in one of my questions, like in growing traction, like will your website, once you start doing these things, because that's my problem is trying to get people to the website. So once you start doing these things, will that increase the website flow, or do they go hand in hand, like the website and the social media, or is it just one or the other, I guess?
Yeah, so this thing, there are short-term improvements that are seen almost immediately, but most of this work is long term. So you got to think about whenever you update your website or you add content, it takes a moment for like the SEO to kind of show through on search engines because it's not something that's instant, right? So just know that this work that you're doing now, you might see like the impact 6 months or so down the line. It's not immediate. But the immediate things that you could do is when you are posting on social media, it's like it's the more that you engage with people and the more quality content that you do provide, you'll begin to see those like instant results. And the coolest thing that I've found is that instead of going from like the generic messaging, it's really crazy how night and day people respond to the content when, if it's just like a small, it's like generic messaging, people don't engage. But if it's like you telling a story or it's something that draws people in, the conversion rate, like it's amazing how you could see the data points like just improve based on that facet. Um, I would say that they do go hand in hand, your website and your content, because I view the website as like a place in which it has more information, right? If someone is interested in the topic, you'll go into more detail, right? And I view social media as this way in which you have, you think of them as breadcrumbs, right? You kind of want to lead someone to the meat, the juiciest part, and it should be your website. But if you are selling a product or if you are selling a service, you need to make it where people, they always talk about the sales pipeline, right? It's like, how do you get people in that pipeline to turn into paid customers or turn into paid clients? So you really have to think of this as like a funnel and a channel for them to become that paid client, right? You want to work with them. You want to, yeah, be a successful business owner, and that's the way to do it. And so they do go hand in hand. I usually take this approach when I am creating content, is that I always start off with like a blog piece, right? And when I get all these thoughts and ideas out and I get it to paper, I then kind of map out my social media post, right? And it's easy to pull from that. And it's easy to kind of sit back and say, okay, well, what's the purpose of what I'm putting out right now? Like, am I trying to get people to attend the event, or am I trying to get people to sign up for a workshop, or am I selling this watch or ring or clothing? Like, you have to make it easy for someone to convert, right? That's the point. So the easier, the better. But also you got to understand that like people could get, try to synthesize it down with the social media post, but then put the media stuff on the website. And so, because then it will work for you on SEO, it will work for you on social media. So I think of them as like together because they can work very well together. But you always have to think about, as I said, empathize with whoever you're trying to reach. Always think about, okay, how many clicks does this person have to go through in order to do what I need to accomplish, right? And you got to make it streamlined because there's one facet that comes up all the time is that people are bombarded by ads every day, right? And we have so much coming at us that there's this word that always sticks out is called cognitive load. It's that people can't get too much information or they'll shut you out. So the less cognitive load that you have for someone, it's easier for them to do what you need to do if you kind of take on that work and then you make it as easy as possible. And so I always say like in the world of user experience, I always say, well, what are kind of the best apps that you've ever interacted with? And then sometimes people, it's funny because they will tell you the app they hated the most than the app that they actually like because the app they like is so well designed that they didn't think about it. But the one app where they to do one thing took so many screens and it frustrated them. It's kind of funny how people kind of pause and like, oh wait, I don't know what app I like because that's just good design and that's like you taking the time to really see the customer journey and for you to put yourself in their position of like am I answering the right questions? Am I providing things that they want or need? Am I making it easy for them to find me? So it plays into marketing so well, like when you start seeing it that way, because then it will tell you what kind of ads you need to do. It will kind of tell you what group of people you need to reach. Even they're like, well, I don't need to post on social media because I'm working with more professionals and I should be posting on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? So it kind of like once you start understanding who you're working with, it really illuminates the path forward on like what you should do and how you should post. So it's not, most of the time people are just like, just post it on social, just post it on social. But that's not a marketing strategy. That's just, um, you're just doing the things without having any purpose behind it. So we're trying to get you out of that, the idea that posting every day will get you customers because it won't. Yeah. So it's just kind of stepping back and like understanding your business even more and further and deeper. So. Yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded response, but I hope that was helpful.
No, it was helpful. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you, Vanessa.
yeah,
Any other questions, anybody?
I guess a comment because
sure.
I've worked with many different organizations and through the time that I've been out there, gosh, 20 plus 30, maybe even 30 years, um, the systems have changed.
Hmm.
They were so complicated or not user friendly in the beginning. Then over time, they've become easier to manage. and trends come and go. This is the way you should have your system operating. And then that disappears because it's like, no, there's a new invention, there's a new way of looking at things. So it's just amazing how websites can just change like after a year. You're finding out it's ineffective because a new technology or capability has been implemented. So then that way, in that sense, your website is like, okay, now we need to adjust to accommodate that new um, need or whatever it is. It's just it's so complex because it's like you almost have to have a media specialist within your system or get it evaluated annually so that you're meeting the needs of what you intended in the beginning. Or maybe you have a new thing you want to change and you want to implement. So I'm just like it's very technical. It's very it's not like you can just create it and then throw it out there and think it's going to work. It's like a baby. You have to give it attention, you have to burp it, you have to feed it, you have to, so it's almost like it is you, it becomes an additional staff member to your team. So it needs attention, you need it, or a program, or I don't know how you want to define it, but it just amazes me because I'm thinking from that perspective, from where I'm at.
Mhm.
It's like I've seen so many systems and there's been some in, like, you're managing so much data and then it could be so convoluted because I've come from programs where the information was so convoluted that, like you said, it became ineffective and people didn't like going to your website because it was so full of junk. Then after you, now things have become a little more streamlined. It's like just put things up that are necessary. So you're constantly needing that attention to evaluate, to clean out, to put away, to save, to, you know, so I'm just amazed by that. So as you, as a behind the scenes developer, what do you recommend in terms of maybe 4 points that we should take away from managing a website? Or you can do any number of recommendations, but I'm just like, sometimes it seems a bit overwhelming. And so for
Mhm.
someone from the management level, what do you
Mhm.
recommend to them for you to review every year to make sure that your system is operating efficiently?
Yeah, so you do have a good point there. Like technology has really changed. Now we're in like a world where people want real-time data, right? But it all depends on your industry, quite honestly. But as a small business owner, or you're the person running it all, my four key takeaways would be that one, you interact more with your customers, try to, just talk to them, like understand like why me, why this product that I made, or why me and why this service. Because once you start talking to the people who actually buy from you, you get like insights that are just so like they're pieces of gold, right? And that if you keep, as you said, it's like a baby you have to take care of. But if you could keep your finger on the pulse and just know what is what, they'll tell you exactly like they're like, hey, right now economy's bad. I can't like buy anything. And then you're like, oh, well, darn, if people aren't gonna buy, what are other ways in which I could still keep them interested? Because if you keep pushing out like buy, 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 you're gonna lose them. So then if you know that people are struggling, in what ways can you still talk about your product or your service where it doesn't require you to you know, they have to buy from you. Like you could keep that. But then when you start noticing, oh, people are now buying, but always say like you're there. It's like always like you don't want it to be too on the nose, but you want to be relevant, right? So like just listen to your customers, kind of once you do that, then you know who you're catering to. It will then kind of inform how you build your website, because then you're not considering all these facets. And as I said, that analogy with the restaurant, I think it was Kitchen Nightmares, where the first thing that gets changed is the menu because they're offering too many like menu options, right? So it's always like synthesize and refine and like give the things that matter to people. So yeah, just like so then listen, cater your product to that. Um, Another thing is there are so many technical solutions out there, but the one thing is, be sustainable in what you can afford and what you could do now, because eventually, um, you don't want to invest in so many products or services that you end up not needing or using, because I find that sometimes people hop onto trends really quickly. But if you were to just break it down and be like, okay, I need a website because it sells my online product. Just stick with the basics and the things that get you, to get the job done, right? And then eventually, as you start building or growing, you could then kind of get more products and services. And so, yes, I started talking about like data structures and like accessing, data analytics and seeing who's visiting. Like you'll get to that point one day because you are growing, you're starting, and if you keep investing in yourself, you'll get there, and that stuff will matter. Um, but for now, just, keep it simple. Um, and then the third I would say um is to just balance the business needs of like what you need to do, and then balance the customer needs in what they want, because when you start seeing the business side with the customer side in between, if it's like a Venn diagram, right? That's like the sweet spot in which that's where you should focus in on, right? It's like I'm I'm thriving as a business owner. Um, but then I'm also creating a product for customers that, what they want and what fulfills their needs, right? So like kind of always think of it like that. It's like a balancing act. Because then it also informs how you present yourself online and like the topics that you need to cover. And then making yourself this digital authority, right? And I think the fourth one would be, as I said, just like be open to that negative feedback, right? And iterate. I really place a lot of my work on design thinking. So design thinking it's not just solving any problem, it's solving the right problem. And the way you begin to understand what is the right problem is you sort of open yourself up, get as much information or data as needed to kind of see all the things. And at first, it can be overwhelming, right? You're like, oh my God, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Oh, I don't have this and I should. Once you start like laying it out, and the thing I do is like to group like the different problems or needs or goals of people together. And the cool thing that happens is when you start grouping them, you begin to see the different themes in the patterns. And once you do that, it's kind of they call it synthesizing data. And a tool that I use in this realm is something called affinity mapping. So if you have like a whiteboard, or even if you have like post-it notes, you could do it. Like write down everything, put them somewhere, and then you could start grouping them by like these themes that come up. And that kind of helps you illuminate the path forward, right? Um, and so therefore it kind of helps you refine your problem or goal that you need to do. And then you can then learn from that, build the solution, test it out, get feedback, and then from that feedback, iterate. Because that when you start doing this like cycle, it just you just begin to improve and improve. So I hope that helps. It's if you want to look it up on Google, just look up design thinking, and then you'll come up with a ton of like articles that kind of go into to further describe it beyond what I could do right now. But that's something that you could take from this. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much. I guess we're kind of at time, but I want to drop my email into the chat. I welcome any of you to reach out to me if you kind of just need like some advice. If you just need some feedback or whatever, I'm happy to provide that. So at any time, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to hear from all of you, and I hope that this workshop was beneficial for you. Definitely want to see all of you succeed and grow. So I'm so proud of you for all that you do and taking that leap of faith and becoming an entrepreneur. So I believe in you and I'm here to cheer you on.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. We appreciate you. It was a great workshop. I really appreciate all the time and effort you put into it, especially giving us the 4 points of what we can do to improve our
Yeah,
website, our socials. So thank you so much. I
totally.
appreciate it. So let's give Vanessa a round of applause, everybody, virtually. So thank you. I appreciate you. So thank you. So
Thank
for a
you.
wonderful workshop. And just the time and effort that you did, even with the workbook, I think that's really helpful and will help you get better at your business as well. So thank you so much. I just want to thank you. And we just, can you see my QR code with the thank you to fill
I
out
didn't
the
I didn't see
survey?
the QR code yet. Yeah. But we got a
Um,
question in the chat. Will this workshop be available? So I'll leave that to you, Jennifer. Will this workshop be anywhere online?
I believe it will also be on our page,
Okay.
our what is it? YouTube
Transformation Thursday.
YouTube channel.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, YouTube channel. So let me just go in here and share. Let's see. Okay, can you see the QR
Yes.
code now? Okay, awesome. So I just want to share that QR code. Please fill out the survey. It helps us, and we appreciate you all for being here. Also, I just want to have you join us for next Transformation Thursday. It's going to be a hybrid, so it's going to be in office as well online. Native Woman Lead is excited to host the upcoming Transformation Thursday, which is going to be May 14th at 5:30 p.m. We're featuring Tina Archuleta. Following her inspiring pitching contest win at the trading at the Rio 2026 Summit, Capital Summit. Tina will share more about her entrepreneurial journey with Vitality and provide valuable pitching tips for fellow entrepreneurs. It's going to be in-house event. It's going to be with limited seating to ensure an intimate experience. So stay tuned for our social media platforms for registration links for further updates. So we'll see you May 14th. And thank you again, Vanessa. We appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
See you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.